From the News Channel 5 Network, this is Urban Outlook.
Hello and welcome to Urban Outlook. I'm April Eaton. Thank you so much for being with us today. The incidents and the numbers of police officer-involved shootings and killings of African Americans continue to be in the spotlight. Of course, we've got the most recent incidents that hit Charlotte and the Tulsa area. We've seen the stories out of Baton Rouge and Baltimore, Minnesota to Missouri, all of these places where things seem to be happening in communities, people trying to figure out what to do to make things right. Shouts of Black Lives Matter often echoing through those streets in those areas. There are some numbers out there. Of the 990 people who were killed by police officers in 2015, this is according to the Washington Post, it reported that 258 of those were black. So far in 2016, there have been 708 documented deaths of police shootings. 173 of those have resulted in deaths of African Americans. So we often want to talk about what's going on, but also what can we do to try to make a difference in our communities? And we also like to look from a historical perspective of where we've come and where we need to go. For that, we call on a favorite friend of ours at Urban Outlook, Dr. Reavis Mitchell, who is the professor of history and the dean of the School of Humanities, Social and Behavioral Sciences over at Fisk University. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Good morning. It's very good to be here for this most important topic.
It's good to be here as well. Of course, we don't like this topic whenever we have to have a conversation about it, but we still seem to see these scenarios, these stories play out in newer and newer communities where we have law enforcement officers with members of the community. Whether there's right going on or wrong going on, somebody seems to end up with their life lost. As you see it, does it seem to be growing in numbers?
I'm not sure it's growing in numbers. I think we're more aware of it now.
Yes.
I think the change in life with social media, with accessibility, I think things that were often hidden had now come to light. It's very important to have conversations about this, though, that we involve everyone in the conversation because it affects everyone's life. You may think because you don't live in one of these areas that you're immune from the discussion. You may think that race gives you some exception, but all humans have a responsibility. All citizens in the United States have a responsibility to act out. We talk about liberty and justice for all, but what we're seeing is not an example of liberty and justice for all. It almost seems to us an example of non-support, non-liberty, repression. But again, it's nothing new. Unfortunately, it's a part of the African American experience.
Well, and that's what I was going to say, because some people feel like it's just history repeating itself, right? And especially of late, when a lot of the conversations that are being had in the halls and walls, especially around the political realm, right, have people a little more free-flowing, it seems, with their words. They're not hiding those comments that they may have thought about us.
That's right. That's
like
right.
they used to.
That's right.
They're saying them right out loud now.
That's right. That's right. Well, we talked about, everybody got upset with Hillary when she tried to use a phrase deplorable. You know whether you're in that phrase or not. You know in your heart. Much of what happens with young people is learned in the home. And parents know if they have a spouse, if they espouse racist views, that it's going to come out.
Yeah.
And you can't hide it behind economics. No one's taken your job. You have no right to a job than anyone else. You have the right to compete. You and I, men and women, have equal rights in this country to jobs in the middle class view. For so many years, African Americans were told you need to get out and make advantage of opportunities. You need to pull yourself up. You need to, well, African Americans to a large extent did. And now there's a certain response from other groups from white America that feels they have certain privileges. Large discussion point in understanding America today is my discussion of white privilege. What privilege? Does race and skin color give you any particular privilege, or are your privileges determined upon your preparation for life? I sell education. I'm an educator. So don't tell me about the rights you have inherently to a job if someone else is better prepared. And if you don't take the opportunity to prepare yourself, believing that you have some inherent, born fatherly and right. What's happened with the movement now? Black Lives and others, it's within the black community. It's brought together diverse groups. The original civil rights movement was student-centered. Even before that, it was centered in the church with Dr. King and Dr. Abernathy, and it reached the college level, but I'm not sure it reached the masses. This revolution has reached the masses. It's a ground from the bottom up. When you first looked at Black Lives Matter, it seemed it was an urban phenomena outside of the South, in the Northeast and the West, which began with urban populations. Now it's being espoused throughout the country. It's being espoused and been given formula by college level African American college students have joined in. Now it's a diverse community because not only are African Americans, but many white Americans are saying, yes, Black Lives Matter. What they're really saying is that in the United States, all lives matter, and this particular group, blacks, have been denied, it appears they've been denied certain rights and privileges based upon their race. But you know, they opened the African American Museum in Washington this week, and there's always a statement, it's not just black history, it's American history. You can't understand American history if you don't understand my history, what I've been a part of. But for too long, it was thought that it was segmented out. History, rights, economic progress are not the preview of one race and to be granted to another. If you really look at the American story, the African American story, to imagine that 180 years ago, someone who looked like me would have arrived here in chains. And 160 years later, someone who looked like me became leader of this country. That's a wonderful story about America. That's what the world, that's the American dream. That's the dream that we talk about. So we must be proud of, but yet it seems as though some people, white people, feel that something's been taken. We're gonna get our country back. Who has taken your country? Not one who would have toiled and worked. When you look at the American economy, people get upset with me, but the original American economy, the great economic force in early colonial America was the buying and selling of slaves. That was what financed this country. Making barrels of rum, making ships, taking it to Africa, trading for slaves, that was the financial impetus for the insurance industry, for the banking industry. That made America. And now, 200, 300 years later, the people who bought and sold said, no, I'm not going to be mistreated anymore. That was the perception that if you were an authority figure, a police officer, that you could do as you wished with these people, that they had no rights, that you couldn't usurp. That's not going to happen anymore.
So what I hear you saying is it's not just about color, it is about authority. It is about those who think that they have privilege over others.
Yes. Yes, yes. And now we've tapped into that at the level of a presidential election. And you have people who feel like they've been denied some of their rights, denied in some instances because they were not prepared, because they did not prepare and become educated jobs, because the rest of the world said we're not going to sit back and give America, the United States. And I'm always careful when I talk about that. We aren't all the Americas. There's Canada, Mexico, North and South. We're not going to give the United States a pass. So it's a changing time. Historians like to look at rise and fall in cultures. Greece, Rome, the Egyptian culture, the dominance of the world by Great Britain. Hopefully we can avert what's happening, but the United States seems to be changing or having its position changed in the world. And we aren't happy about that in this country. We want to find something, you know, we talk about those jobs. The jobs that once made America invincible, the auto industry, the industrial jobs, those jobs left the country.
Right, things have changed since then, right?
They're gone.
It's unfortunate, but
you don't have to drive just a Ford, you can drive a Toyota.
That's true.
And they can make Toyotas not just in Japan, but they can make a Nissan or Toyota right here in Tennessee. And so the people working on the lines may be Tennesseans, but the money is flowing outside of the country. It's a diverse international economy. And this conversation was going on around the world.
So when we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk, because you kind of touched on a little bit what we're hearing throughout this presidential campaign. But I also want to get back to some lessons learned. We had a conversation about this before, many years before. Unfortunately, we're still having this conversation. And I remember something you told me about the way you taught your sons to act if they happen to be stopped by a police officer. And I want to talk about some of those life lessons that you taught your then young sons, now grown sons now, when we come back after this. So let's take a quick break. We'll see you back in just a little bit.